나는 진짜 맞고
Yeah, upstairs. Yeah.
Can someone put someone who's near the door, you know, to check for Sophie?
Sorry, if you had to talk more, it's just being heard over.
Wait, where should we move to?
Just like one seat down.
Sorry?
There's a microphone here that's taking over the live stream, so if you guys want to move one seat down. Sorry about that. Yeah, it is should be fine.
That's their problem.
I delegated.
Sorry about this, but is there any chance that we can continue into all the row and then we can move down here just so that everybody there's not enough seats for everyone, so we're just going to have a over
Really have to.
Have a grand old take.
Steven, can you check your stream?
Or OG.
You guys want to move right there? We'll just sit there. Yeah, you can take the microphone check. That's right, yeah, you can
Welcome to the final of the Trinity Open 2017. Can I ask for a round of applause to all the teams for making it this far?
Thanks, Tony. First, your name, please. Thank you.
Sophie speaking second, she'll like that.
Opening opposition. Closing glove.
Etsuko Shifu. Kate Bay.
And closing off.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nesh. Your name is fine.
Okay. Everyone, this room has very good acoustics, which in this sense means very bad acoustics. This means that during the debate, I need everyone who is not currently speaking or currently giving a POI to shut it. If at any point I see you talking, I will aggressively shut you, and then I will make you leave the room if I catch you again. And that's not just being me being mean. We want these teams to have a great debate and to enjoy themselves and to not have to worry about whether we are able to listen to them. So please respect the debate, and please, obviously, I don't feel like I need to say this, but let everybody have a nice time or whatever. So, without any further ado, I invite Tex to the floor to open the debate.
Is there any way we can turn this blue light off?
Can you put mute on the right there?
On that little screen right there that looks like it's a tiny computer.
You okay with Are you alright with the live stream?
Yeah. I think the horrifying intuition pumped against presumably writing something is that some of the most intelligent people I know, top world's debaters, rule number ones in all their sort of shapes and forms, would end up using this policy, I suspect, in some very drastic ways. Some of them would prop hard deontology, some of them would prop hard utilitarianism, and as a result of writing things in the gospel, make all of us, I suspect, in many cases, do things we would firmly reject. Our stance is very simple. Instead of writing something, we would rather retire. Now, know that as opening government, we don't really quite get to engage with opening opposition's alternative, at least right now, so I'm not quite sure what they're going to write in, but we're going to make some guesses as to to what the most impactful things might be. But know that in our world, you wouldn't write anything at all. You would lead a quiet life somewhere, and you would not ever let anyone know that you have this power by writing things today. Now, they might question, is this motivationally possible? At some point in your 40s, when you just go, I could have done things differently. The answer is actually in the motion itself. You should today write a piece convincing yourself, i.e. without OG case, not to do this. Every time you feel as though you're trapped in the horrors of doubt, read it and you will be convinced. Number one, what happens if you get this wrong? You think it's very likely, but number two, even if you get it right, why it's not a good idea. If you get it wrong, 4 observations. The first is that whatever Ott wants to propose, to promote using something in their gospel, they must be able to conclusively demonstrate it is good. Something that philosophy for 2,000 years has not been able to establish. Because otherwise, at the level of magnitude of this debate, you're proposing writing something into gospel to be followed for all time. No, thank you. You can't claim it as a benefit in this debate where we don't have access to whether that's actually good or not. Number two, in light of that, epistemic humility, I suspect, is the wisest choice for 2 reasons. Number one, because future moral development might mean that what we think is good today isn't actually what we sort of know for any real certainty is ultimately good. Some examples are when people who firmly believed in things like the patriarchy or slavery were firm sort of people in the Enlightenment, right? They felt as though what they were doing was a moral advancement from times before that, but were not ultimately able to recognize that those things would change over time, and that what they thought was correct today would not be correct as we move forward going to the future. The second reason for this is that the average right guy, I suspect, does not have the full breadth of knowledge and lived experiences of human beings in the world today. That is to say, even if there are all the ingredients we need to form the best moral theory right now, i.e. there's no time problem, it's not like any one human being has access to all those ingredients and can put those together into a composite moral theory. Third of all, even what seem to be uncontroversial axioms can sometimes justify a terrible action. Here is the reason why. The parallel as to why we don't really feel comfortable writing directives for robots. Because even if you concretize something that seems uncontroversially good, the pursuit of that is not a good idea at all costs. So for example, you might say, in this moral doctrine, or this sort of gospel, this latest bestseller like Amazon or some shit, respect human rights. The right to life, for instance, should be respected in all cases. But this just leads to a utilitarianism of rights, where the most plausible interpretation is that we would violate some individuals' rights, not right now, in order to protect life writ large. And no, this again feeds back to the same problem, right? We have no real reason to think that utilitarianism is the right one. So we're going to have to use a moral theory to interpret these gospels anyway, and if we don't have certainty there, it's not like we can ever claim with any real confidence this is the right thing to do. Go ahead.
So, presumably when you write this gospel, the point of it is that people believe it, not necessarily that they act in exactly the way that you think that they will on that basis.
Yeah, so they'll believe it, and that's even worse, right? Because they won't act in how you intended in many cases. They'll act based on their interpretations of their belief of your words. If anything, that's good for us. But the fourth observation here is that it's just practically impossible to lay out a full moral code. A 1,000-page document of if-then statements which people could follow to the letter and forever do the right thing. It's just implausible, but more importantly, as Sophie tells me, what if someone just skips a page and decides not to read like chapter 12 or something? The upshot of all of this is that we have no real moral certainty that we're going to make the world a better place by writing something down. In fact, if anything, the reason why you as a writer should care is because if people do things bad, it is not like just a general bad, it's done in your name. It's done on your deathbed. You'll realize it's no thank you, it's done because of the work you pen. It's something you will feel responsible for till the day you die. To the extent that, like, I wouldn't say it's a moral wash, but to the extent there's uncertainty about what will happen, whether it's good or bad, I think the fact that some bad actions will accrue in your name is a reason for you to not do this. We think the reasonable alternative is epistemic humility. It's living a normal life. It's being no better, but also no worse than any of us in this room. Second argument, what happens even if you get it right? 2 things to note here. The first is that as soon as you use this power and a pattern comes about that everyone seems to treat what you say as a sort of superior belief, there's a huge incentive for governments or people to capture you and abuse you and utilize you. Now, no, this sounds a bit fanciful, right? But it's really a core premise of many superhero movies if you think about it. And note, it's not like in this case you have a superpower to get out of those situations. Your main power is being able to convince people that something is true. But once you are captured, for instance, and denied access to the written word, or held at gunpoint, or your family is held at gunpoint, if not, otherwise, to make you write something basically that is in those individuals' interest, you lose that power, you lose the ability to protect yourself. So there's a huge risk here. There's a risk that your powers and abilities, once projected on a global stage, will be used for the wrong purposes, even if originally you got it right. More importantly, as a human being, you can never have true emotional connections. You can't have a wife, you can't have a husband, you can't have a partner, you can't have kids. No, thank you. Like, the risk of doing so is that you could be held hostage, and as a result, the fate of the world at large. It's better, I suspect, if you don't let anyone find out you have this power, just so, there's no real incentive to get like an ordinary Joe like me and you, so on and so forth. That's a comparative. Second observation here. Look, best case scenario for this op-ed is they prove a few things. They prove there's a good at stake. They prove that by writing a certain thing, they get people to do the good thing or enjoy more of the good thing. Right? That seems to be the common structure to most debating arguments. Even in that sense, I don't think this is a good idea. Why? I suspect it's illiberal for a very simple reason. As liberal individuals, we distinguish between substantive liberal goals like equality, like fairness, but we also have liberal actions. And thank you. We try to permit people to make choices for themselves. We permit actions. We permit moral development for the simple reason that we respect every agent as a person with rational faculties, with the ability to reason for themselves, the ability to make these choices. And respecting you as a person means respecting that process. I think it's quite obvious that that process of moral decision-making is not respected at the point where you have a superpower that makes people treat what you say as the word of some secular god. The parallel here is to democracy, because look, democracy doesn't always produce the best outcomes compared to some philosopher king, but we love it anyway, and we think it's the most legitimate system because people get to make those choices for themselves in aggregate. But look, simple question, right? If the Queen one day decided that some policy, like, I don't know, proportional representation or some alternative form of voting was better for the UK, I don't think that's a good reason for the Queen to use her power to sign that into law to impose that on us. Ultimately, it's still a democratic decision we make. And look, if it's truly so powerful and effective that some system or some moral code is better, for this opposition to be so certain that that's a good in this debate, they could just as well use that evidence to convince the vast majority of reasonable people that that's the right thing to do. So either they're not certain, in which case, meh, on imposing it, but if they are that certain, I suspect most people would be willing to listen to them anyway. Very proud.
So Glena and I decided in prep that we're going to have a picture book that's going to say 3 words, and it's going to say taxes theft. We're actually going to be a lot more reasonable in this kind of strange debate, and what we're going to talk about is what we're saying is we're not going to have any of the prescriptive, specific what is or isn't okay, like OG talked about. We're not going to tell you climate change is or isn't okay because we don't think you can ever quantify that in the long term for all of their analysis. What we're going to do is we're going to publish a baseline book that tells you that human dignity and respect is something all individuals deserve, regardless of their age, gender, sexual orientation. We don't care. We're giving you a baseline of what is or isn't okay or permissible in wider society. We think that is a norm that most people respect, and if people don't respect it, we're happy to force them to because we think it's something we care about. 2 points of this speech. I'm going to talk to you about challenging base assumptions and why that's, or changing base assumptions and why that's important, and then I'm going to talk to you about manipulating beliefs and why we don't care and we think we're legitimate in doing it. Before that, just some rebuttal. So then we heard, first of all, we heard this weird superhero thing that's going to ruin your life and you're going to be kidnapped and forced to write stories for someone else or whatever. Just like, we're happy to stand up as the author and say, I'm going to write this anonymously, I'm going to put it in a letter and post it to a publisher to do it on my behalf. If I don't see any benefit in posting other books, I will just post this one. You lose all of their benefits when I'm just someone who's put something in a post box that's ended up to your ad. Because note, the important thing is you still get our impacts, because when you read a book and it's changed all of your preconceived notions on an idea, that book will likely spread to more people. Note that anonymous authors are still widely successful, so we still get those benefits. Secondly, we heard that it's really important to give people their own way to decide their morals. We thought it's true for the most part, but some people's morals are apparent. Some people deny people based levels of respect and actively repress people. Some people kill people based on how they look or where they're from or their sexual orientation. Insofar as that is true, Plina and I say you should force these people to change their morals to the best of our extent. The only thing we know that can do that is this book. That's why we're happy to publish it. First point on changing base assumptions. Note, it's important to realise that a lot of society don't have the same base assumptions, so they otherise people or don't often view them to the same respect of other people. That's the baseline of racism that exists in society, or homophobia, or any of the other horrible things. But it's important, even of those people who do support or do support like being LGBT or anti-homophobia, often just pay lip service to it. They don't do anything meaningful to stand up for those beliefs. They don't do anything meaningful to prevent them. We're not saying people should overthrow the world. We're saying fundamentally people should recognise there's a level of dignity and respect for people. Why do we think we get that? Because no, it's just the most basic thing that we change, and that's why we think we can win this debate. Because it's just the simple general respect for another human being. We think you can instill that to people who read that, and particularly when someone who was previously racist reads this book and has their ideas changed, we think that becomes a talking point to get more people to read that story. Note that, like, it's important to recognise, they said, you know, we're going to make our calculus on a utilitarian basis and that's going to be really bad. We're not, because we're not telling everyone to value human life, we're not telling you to quantify human life in this book, we're just telling people that respecting people is something we stand for and something that we think is good. I'll take back off if you have one. Yeah?
I suspect most racists hold a more nuanced view than just I disrespect some people. They're willing to couch their views while being perfectly consistent with these things. If your side doesn't change any real action, then what is the good exactly?
But it's an emotion, and it's a problem, because now they're going to take it as gospel, so their action will be changed to the point at which they now believe that respecting people is something I should do. I believe it, I do think it's a bit weird, and the emotion's a bit unfair, but it's just... Thank you. So it's important to recognise if you don't ever get that level of respect and dignity for people in their daily life. Because what happens under status quo is a conversation exists when someone is lying in a bed that one person says that person is legitimate and getting healthcare and another person says that person isn't a person. We think that means in politics or in daily life, we're just treating people. You don't treat them in the same way you should. You actively make it harder for those individuals and you actively repress them. We think in the most horrific circumstances, it means people are attacked for who they are. But we think on a base circumstance, it means when you're just deciding government policy, you're more than happy to deliberately screw over people because you know it's inherently in your interest. We think you give people a level of baseline respect and dignity, and that's something we specifically give you. Second point on manipulating beliefs. So note that we were told that this is a terrible idea because you're forcing people to change. I already responded and explained why when people have terrible morals, we should probably force them to change. But no, it's important to recognise that everyone is a construct of what society around you has told you to be. So the reason that we know hitting someone is bad and I can't hit Fiona is not just because the law is against it, or she'll probably hit me back on that. But it's just more importantly that I know it's something that is bad or something that is against me. If you take them at their best, people should be free to choose whatever they want to do regardless of customs. No, school tells me what is or isn't okay. The law tells me what is or isn't okay. My parents do in every sphere, but it's important to recognise that certain groups like your parents or certain groups like your school or certainly your family tell you the wrong thing of what is or isn't okay. So we as a state decide the best possible thing to do is instill norms of the baseline of what is or isn't legitimate. That's why we manipulate people with laws. That's why we manipulate people with customs and tell them what is or isn't okay or legitimate. We think, insofar as we respect this principle, because we respect a general rule of law and we respect a general respect for other individuals, we know it's needed to function. We think principally it's the exact same thing under our side of the house. Because what you do is you instill in people a baseline to follow and to respect. But it's more important than any law that has previously happened, because people are forced to follow it and they're forced to at least believe that it's true. We don't think it means that everyone will stand up and riot, but we think when I believe something is empirically true, I'm less likely to actively oppose it. On that basis, we think it's a reasonable thing to do. We think, note that it's important to recognise this happens with every single other one of our customs. We restrict some people's individual liberty and autonomy to have a free, complete moral choice because you recognise it's in our direct benefit. But note, it's important to realise that this is an actor debate. I think if I am an individual who has the ability to massively change how people think on a base level, doesn't mess up the world, but has a general level of respect for other individuals, and to know that I can make a direct difference to people's lives on a small level, we think that's hugely important. We think imperative is when they stand up and say, I know I can just go and retire and I can sit back and not get involved in it. We think when you know you can publish this anonymously and there's not a large likelihood that it'll ever get back to you. But even if it does, in the worst case, when you're known as someone who published a work that is good and true and pure, we think that is something you care about. We think the comparative that you sit in that house miserable every time you see something on TV and you see a basic thing you could have changed. Every time you see that hate in that world and you knew there was a metric for you to make it slightly better, you didn't. I'm going to live the rest of my life as that author, sitting in that house, terrified and upset that I know I could have changed something and I never will. They're right that you get a peaceful life. But what is a peaceful life when I hate every second of my existence and hate everything I cause? We think you will feel like you're directly responsible for all the things you could have prevented. We really would love to promote full communism. Sadly we didn't, but I think we still will. Happy to oppose.
I'd like to thank Adam for that speech and invite Toby to the floor.
Speaker, as an author, I mean not me, I mean this house, we understand deeply the complexities of language. And the word respect can mean different things to different people. And when you don't give people the capacity to weigh up that against other things that might be important, against other alternative conceptions to this opening opposition of what might be important in their lives, you take away all of their freedom. It's hugely illiberal and hugely risky. 3 things, or kind of 2.5 things in this speech. It's going to be a little bit messy, but I'm going to try to flag things as I go along and walk you through. The first thing I'm going to do is broadly responses to opening opposition's conception of the word respect. Secondly, I'm going to build on text and material already about what additional risks there might be, because it seems like opening opposition's case is you write the most vanilla thing ever and then you retire. And lastly, I'm going to add as to why your personal relationships are fucked over, adding to the reasons about the fear that you might be co-opted by, for instance, your partner or the state for their purposes. Firstly, responding to opening opposition. Opening opposition just wants to write words, human dignity or individual human dignity is important and you should generally respect each other. I think the first thing to say is that text preempted this when he said that notion, or the notion that you're doing something good that is respecting other people, or is helping them in some way, is the kind of thing that's justified all kinds of problems in the past. No. The second thing to say here is people interpret that differently with a different threshold of respect. Morality cannot be really conveyed in words, let alone conveyed in a few words. And for the reasons text told you, if closing government wants to go in a different direction and write the entire moral code, a lot of problems will happen there. And I'll add a few more, maybe in like 3 minutes, but I mean, it's a little early for Danish, settle down. The next thing to say, I guess what they're trying to say here is their notion that the family manipulate you and that the state manipulates you, and the crucial difference here is it's a single person who is deciding that their vision of, best case, if you are able to convey your version of what respect means or what morality means, it's a single person who's doing it and imprinting that on other people who don't have the capacity to weigh that up against other things that might be important. The thing to say, I think that's just to say, firstly, you're not going to be able to convey it, and if you are, it's probably going to be misused. But best case for this opening opposition, I think it's incredibly epistemically arrogant of their conception, which is respecting other individuals. Often, if they get what they want out of this, you're excluding a whole lot of alternative moral theories that do things that, for instance, practice community versions of morality and emphasizes the importance of potentially giving yourself in the service of others and not necessarily maintaining your own individual dignity and the individual dignity of units of people as the most important thing in this world. That's just raising in about three minutes of the open opposition speech about basic human dignity, 2,000 years of moral thought outside the Western tradition. That's not something we're happy to do. No. So next case. Why can't they guarantee that this word about respect is the only thing that they're going to get out of here? I think text broadly told you that a whole lot of reasons why you might be tempted to, and opening opposition, thinking that they're the great moral arbiter of everyone on this planet, seems to suggest that probably in 5 or 10 years they're still going to be thinking that, and then they get a couple more good ideas about how they, even if it works out, if they get a few more ideas, they might be more tempted to go into it. A couple more things to add here. No. The first is you might go senile. You could get Alzheimer's. My grandmother had a brain tumour, and she's from Nottingham, by the way, and became obsessed with the idea that our family had to return to England. I eventually did that, and today's weather in this part of the world accepting, I think it's been a pretty bad choice in a whole lot of ways. But importantly, it wasn't her role to decide, and even if you had this notion that you just put out this statement about respect, what if 10 or 15 years later you get some weird hang-up and you don't have a piece of paper to tell you that you're never going to write anything? As per the MEC, and I assume what the fee out of this debate allows, we think that's a huge risk to take. The second thing to say here is once you die, your written word doesn't die. We told you that for the vast majority of history, people have been wronged by a modern conception of what respect, or respect for individuals, or human dignity means. And that means you can't correct for mistakes or clarify your meaning when it's misused, when people take it and use it in vain against what you mean. Maybe a little bit, no. I think the thing to take away here is to be so arrogant as to think that even the words respect can be conveyed by people and understood, to think that that might be the only right, or to take away people's capacity to weigh that up against potential moral ends, is so incredibly risky. The probability of really horrifying things happening in your name happening is greater than zero, and to have people die on your hands, to have people use some notion that you think is good against you, not be able to control it in the future, is the reason this government wins already. Yeah, closing.
Why is this person apparently both so specifically concerned with social morality and aware of complex philosophy as to consider that relevant to them, as opposed to just pursuing their own individual interests or beliefs, which are probably relatively minor?
I'm going to talk to you right now about their individual personal relationships, because we think even if you did use it only for personal ends, you're not really able to predict how it's used when it affects other people, and often it'll make you a lot more unhappy. Talking about that now on personal relationships. Text already told you that you fear your power being co-opted, and that's another reason, for instance, why opening opposition doesn't work out. Because if someone ever finds out that you have this power, for instance, if you share this secret with your loved one in a really intimate scenario, and they decide that they might tell someone else, and eventually the state finds out and uses you for your own ends, that's hugely fucking bad. But even if that doesn't happen, we think you co-opting others is something you shouldn't engage in by closing opposition's metric, even if you might be slightly richer or slightly, no thank you, more well off. Why is that the case? I think it's hugely damaging to your personal relationships. The first thing to observe here is that your friends and family and those around you will likely be reading your work. And Nish seems to suggest in that point of information that's something he's happy to do for the people around you to have their freedom of thought taken by you unilaterally, particularly when maybe you have the capacity to convince them verbally and not in the written word. But the second thing to say here is I think the best and most meaningful parts of life are the ones that feel authentic, the relationships that feel equal, and the relationships that feel trustworthy. That is the reason why abusive relationships, for instance, are so bad or so harmful, because when one person doesn't have the control and another does, then that is not truly a relationship. And however you use it, you're going to have to render some of the people around you unable to be free. When they, for instance, read your Facebook message about needing to be at brunch at 10 a.m. in the morning and are forced to go there against everything else that might come up in their morning, when you're not able to truly believe that they're there because they care about you, we think that's something that plagues you for the rest of your life. The fear that everything you have is by virtue of this power and not by virtue of you as a human being. Speaker, the risk that you ruin the world for everyone else is great enough, and that's something that means that for some perceived personal benefit, you should never use this power, but even if you wanted personal gain, you alienated yourself and you made yourself full of fear. So proud to stand in government.
Sophie's speech and Maltian as the floor. Here.
Go folks, it's going to be a roller coaster of a speech, let me tell you. Two things in this speech. First of all, I'm going to tell you about axioms and the absolute impossibility of convincing people of certain base axioms about other people, which takes out, I think, quite a lot of the PM speech about how if we believe this strongly enough, we can just convince people through the use of rational argument, which I think is untrue. And second, I'm going to tell you about beliefs and how it is that we store different beliefs, and how it is that this gospel is the only mechanism by which we can truly convince people of certain things that we just think are true universally. A couple of things, a couple of points of rebuttal, I think 7 in total. Number one, OG's response to our, I admit, very minimal claim in terms of the book we're going to write, because Sherlock hits a debate at least. Their response is, well, respect can be interpreted differently. We'll just write a very big and nuanced book about what respect is. We're not going to write 3 sentences on respect each other, but it's up to you what you think respecting is, then there would be no point to this debate. So we're going to explicate what we mean by respect in terms of there are people, rather there are certain things that everyone is absolutely deserving of, i.e. a minimal amount of dignity that adheres regardless of what your ethnic background, your race, your sexual orientation, or any of those identifying features are. That's what we stand over. Then their only response to this is, well, this excludes people with communitarian values. I put it this way, we're not writing lib theory. We're not writing out the individual is the only thing that matters in the world. Again, this is a really minimal claim. So even within communal structures, you can still believe that people are minimally worthy of certain levels of respect and should be treated with dignity regardless of how it is that they are identified. The second thing is that, this comes out in Sophie's speech, well, once you write the first one, it's kind of like a gateway drug. You might want to write some more books about things that people should believe. Like, put it this way, that's also true of retiring. Like, insofar as you retire, presumably you could then choose not to, and at that point, this debate is pointless, right? Insofar as Adam tell you we're going to write one book about respect, and then maybe retire, then that's also a debate, right? Insofar as we can have a debate about that one book. Then the claims about Alzheimer's, I'll point out that Alzheimer's is a wash, because presumably if you retire and then suffer from dementia, you potentially will not remember that promise you made to yourself about not writing books that will convince people of very minimally true things about other people. So I don't think that's a problem either. Thirdly, the idea that this will be misused in some way, right? Or that your words will be misused by other people. To be boring about it, that is just patently not within the spirit of emotion. Like, it's clearly not. This house would write a book that many people will interpret in their own way, and then take that interpretation as gospel, because that's just a status quo with any writer, right? Believe the things you say, so it has to be the case that the things we say will be interpreted as we say them. We are not going to do that in a particularly prescriptive way, but we will say that certain things are minimally true about other people. Fourthly, on superheroes, sorry, not superheroes, but I've written superheroes. Whether you'll be kidnapped and forced to write things against your will. That is also true if you retire, right? Because it's not like when you retire you don't have the power anymore. It's that you've chosen not to use the power. So insofar as people will force you to use it, that's a problem on Prop 2. Fifthly, on the not telling, on the idea that you won't be able to tell people, or that people might find out, so you can't tell people again. Also a prop problem, because you still have the power, you're just choosing not to exercise it. So insofar as you tell your significant other, by the way, I have this power, and then they happen to tell someone else, that also adheres on prop, not a point.
On this.
But finally, I think this is significant in terms of relationships. Their claim is we can't have a life partner or a wife or a husband insofar as you have this power. Again, still a prop problem, because you still have the power, you're just choosing not to exercise it. But beyond that, lies are a healthy part of a lot of relationships. They just are. Like, I tell a lot of lies. To be honest, it's not that unhealthy a thing to do. You can have certain secrets, but beyond that, I think this is the most true response to this. Insofar as you're writing this thing and dedicating the power to this thing that you believe, I would find it bizarre that you would believe it so strongly you would impose it on the rest of the world, and yet not have a relationship with someone who also believes it's true. Because presumably the only harm in that situation is that your boyfriend thinks, well, you've manipulated me into thinking that other people are minimally worthy of baselines of respect. If that's a problem in your relationship, there are far more significant ones at play there. Finally, on the Facebook messages, I don't think the prop is everything you write. I don't think people are going to be compelled to also buy your shopping list because you committed it to paper. I think it has to be about the books you write. Go.
Your side wants to change behaviors in the world writ large. If you think, if overnight the most conservative part of Texas changes their most fundamental moral beliefs, don't you think this makes it more likely that on outside when you just retire and tell no one about this, that someone will find out you have this power?
No, because again, if that's an issue, we'll just post it anonymously, or maybe we'll post it on Reddit or something, I don't know. But just do something whereby people would find out who we are. But if the main problem is that Texas is going to change from being a conservative heartland to minimally respecting other people, oh dear. On to axioms, right? Their main claim is that it is wrong to impose certain belief systems on other people who don't consent to it. Instead, we should be using rational argument. This, by the way, is my favorite argument to make in debates. I make it in very many, yet people don't tend to anticipate it. So here we fucking go, right? Here's the problem. There are many things that you cannot convince people of by use of rational argument. No. Including the prop case, by the way. An example of that is very base axioms about how it is that we should treat people. For example, you cannot prove that women are equal to men by use of rational argument. You also can't do it by pointing to brain scans. You can't use it by pointing to a book of revealed truth we have about it. It's an assumption we make, but it is a healthy assumption. It's a beneficial assumption. It is more beneficial than assuming that women are not equal to men. And here's the problem. Insofar as you pursue an agenda that tries to prove that rationally, you will fail, because there is no use of reason you can ever use to prove that that axiom is true. Insofar as we believe it's a beneficial one, I'm quite happy to transplant those kind of beliefs into the brains of other people by use of my work, because I think it is the most significant thing for us to believe about one another, because otherwise our modes of discussing how it is we should treat people are absolutely incommensurable. They just literally don't engage at all, because I believe one thing minimally about human beings that you don't, so there's no way for us to rationally argue with one another. Very finally and very quickly on belief. The way in which you hold beliefs is interesting in your brain, in that I can have an understanding that racism is wrong or that classism is wrong, and yet have a symbolic belief or a symbolic memory of walking through a certain area and feeling afraid. And those two thoughts, when they come into conflict with one another, is the reason why people are classist despite calling themselves not classist. We cut to the absolute heart of what it is that people believe about one another, remove that symbolic belief in a way you never can with rational argument, and can't in any other way. Happy to oppose.
I'd like to thank Rhea and invite Axel to go to the floor to continue the reason of
Yeah. You look too.
I think the central problem that underlies opening opposition's case is the, I'm sorry to say this, moral arrogance with which they assume that they do know what exactly is true about the world. Let's take O at their best, where you literally just write the words, human dignity, respect everyone equally. I'm going to say that even that itself is something that's quite controversial, and in fact, something that not all people agree on. First extension, how taking them at their best, where literally you're trying to convince people that everyone has equal moral value, that literally paralyzes and cripples any sort of meaningful moral decision making that a society collectively has to make. Second, how it crucially empties your life of any sort of meaning at all, and last of all, how knowing that you have this power actively corrupts your intentions. So on balance, you are more likely to have this sort of malignant intentions that OG alluded to. Before that, just one extraneous point of rebuttal to the dying moments of cleaner speech. She says that there are concepts like women are good and have rights as well, which are hard to convey through rationality. Like, first, that might be true, but I think there are other ways of conveying that. For instance, by appealing to emotion, by telling people that look at how you treat your mother or your daughter, etc. I'm not sure why the logical corollary to that is to literally rob everyone of their moral agency. Second, they fail to recognize that obviously there's a trade-off here. So maybe convincing some people that women have rights is a good thing, but you're literally removing them of the capacity to make any sort of autonomous decisions at all. I'm not sure why on balance this is a net gain. First extension, how you paralyze moral decision making. Oh, we're quite sneaky with this, right? You try to say, we're just setting a nominal baseline for people to follow. But in order for society to function meaningfully, no. You often implicitly do require judgments of who deserves moral respect and often the levels of moral respect that people deserve. What do I mean by this in concrete terms? First, in terms of things like the death penalty, making such societal judgments entails moral judgments as to who deserves moral respect. Or rather, in terms of things like immigration, who we want to let into our borders and who we think deserves the fullest extent of recognition of human dignity. Or even things like allowing animals or chimpanzees to have full voting rights as humans. All of which are important decisions that society has to contend with, and implicitly, even if not explicitly, entails a weighing of who deserves moral respect and dignity and to what extent. So even taking O's case at their best, that you literally just want people to believe that everyone has equal human dignity, you literally produce a society that cannot function because society literally depends on our assessments of who deserves such moral respect and dignity. Notice that opposition then has to defend one of two things. One, either that you defend a specific brand of moral respect that leads to the sort of deleterious outcomes that OG talked about. But O's best case is where literally you produce the most bland and most watered down version of human respect and dignity possible. Notice that the more generic the message, the greater the room and propensity for misinterpretation. They told us that, no, but the motion says that gospel means that whatever, however you interpret it to be, will be respected emotional and can never contend with the important moral decisions that need to be made. But second, poet empties your life of any sort of meaning. Notice that you as an author probably have two huge priorities in life. One is that you probably want some degree of public recognition and satisfaction of knowing that the work you have produced is worthy of public recognition. What then happens is that you literally are never able to know if the work you have produced is something that the public genuinely enjoys. Because notice that the reaction will always be that the public will treat everything you say as the literal truth and gospel. You are trapped in a scenario where you never know if the public genuinely enjoys the work for the artistic merit that it deserves. I think that for many people, especially authors, who base like 15 years of their life producing one noteworthy piece of literature, it is that public satisfaction and appreciation of their hard work that is what is most important and most motivational for them. You literally take away the single greatest joy and source of joy in their lives that is possible. But second, in terms of the friendships you make, okay, I want to point you to this website known as theredstars.wordpress.com. Some of you might know that it is Ashish Kumar's blog. The reason why it's important is because he himself acknowledged that it was literally after he became the best debater in the world that he started questioning if people were his friends simply because they recognized how good a debater he was rather than appreciation of who he was like as a person and the kind of friend that he could possibly be. This is the kind of insecurity that now plagues you as an author and all of your personal interactions. You constantly second guess whether or not people are your friends or love you because of what you've read and how they're brainwashed into this kind of robotic drone, or whether because they genuinely appreciate who you are as a person. To be clear, it is this insecurity that leads to us to exhibit the worst traits of humanity possible. I think things like jealousy or possessiveness are often a function of you being insecure about your position in your personal relationships. You only massively increase the propensity for such unhealthy traits to be exhibited. Cleaner tells us that, but lies are a healthy part of relationships. On the first level, I would contest that. I'm not sure that's entirely true. But second, even if that is the case, surely not everything you say is a lie. I might be wrong, but I would like to believe like my conception of relationship is probably a decent and functional one. Spouse argument, therefore, how it actively corrupts your intentions. No, okay, before we continue, yeah.
Okay, why do you think that I am Immanuel Kant rather than someone who has a particular interest in the shape of hedgehogs' ears?
Oh yeah, sure. So, to be clear, if you are the sort of person who will write about fairly trivial interests that I'm really talking about here, I think that the knowledge that you have such immense power concentrated in your hands, on balance, produces a tendency for you to use this for malignant purposes. OG said that there is moral uncertainty. You don't have epistemic monopoly over truth, therefore you should display some degree of epistemic humility. Taking off as their best, where you are currently a fairly benign author, I think it is the knowledge and temptation of the amount of power you wield that often prompts you towards the worst kinds of human behavior. CEO said that, no, you might use this for fairly trivial purposes, like hedgehog ears, for instance. I think the minute you write something, you feel that public glorification, that public revelation and recognition, where literally everything you say is celebrated and treated as the holy gospel. It is immensely hard for the average author out there to resist the temptation of writing more and more things that are in your self-interest. You promote a brand of moral intuition that is in line with your own. You write things that glorify yourself and make yourself out to be a far greater person than you are. So I think on balance, it is probably that give and receive process feedback loop, where the minute you write something, it is so positively received, it creates the immense temptation for you to use it for evil. So if CEO wants to base a case around hedgehog ears, I think fairly speaking, one, I don't think that's really an important thing in this debate, in that its impacts are fairly marginal. But second, if you want to write about hedgehog ears, I think everyone is entitled to their own conception of whether hedgehog ears are good or not. I'm not sure it's Tim's position to tell us that. For all of these reasons, proud to oppose.
Tim.
Sorry?
You okay with the live stream?
What, live stream?
You want live stream?
Wow.
Guys, we're doing really well on the noise front. Let's not ruin it now, okay?
And the objectification front, apparently.
Here's the headphones.
next to this group. Well, this has been bizarre. It is telling that you tell debaters the word author, and they go, I must rewrite moral philosophy. I think this has been a very strange debate, which tells you that you as an author must necessarily want to change the shape of the world. I think that is really, really odd. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to basics and tell you why the only thing we know about the person in this motion is that they are an author. I'm going to tell you about the interests that an author might have and why it would probably be in my interest to keep fucking writing. Okay, let's do a couple of extraneous pieces of rebuttal and then we're going to go straight into that very long piece of extension. Look, there is no reason that I'm necessarily going to be found out, captured, my loved ones held hostage, kept at gunpoint and tortured for the rest of my life, because I could just write a really compelling treatise on the best way to contour. It's only if my books are biblical or trying to rewrite philosophy so that this is necessarily going to accrue. I don't think we know that. I don't think we know we are liberal or socially conscious or even a particularly nice person. The worst case social scenario described in CG is that you accidentally enslave the entire world. I don't think that when I come to write a book, that's something that even comes to the top of my mind. Even if I know people are going to take it as gospel truth, I don't think that's something that is going to occur to me. No. So, top half make suppositions about the kind of argument I might make, or the existence of moral facts, or the question of whether I might be captured and my loved ones tortured. I would give us a specific conception of a particular author with one thing that they could write, which might be good for most people. We're going to tell you, no matter who you are, if you're an author, you should keep writing. Because I'm going to go back to basics on this. The only thing I know about myself is that I am an author. In the absence of any weird suppositions about where I came in the birth lottery, I know that. As an author, what do I want? I want to be listened to. I want to impart my message to the world. I want to tell stories. I want to communicate ideas. I might not be in the business of prescription. I might just want to write a factual book about the scientific evidence of the shape of a hedgehog's ears, or a book about the Second Punic War if I'm Raffi Marshall. In the absence of any other information, all we know is that we want to be listened to, that we need that. Most authors never publish more than one book, and it's not for want of trying. Publishers rejected Harry Potter the first 100 fucking times, and I as an author can be deeply perfectionist. I'm likely to be more so at the point where I recognise the power that my books have. But I have now the unique ability to make sure that I am listened to. I can write the heartbreak biography that I always wanted people to believe but never thought that they would. I can write my screed on the consequences of the regular consumption of big fucking huge bags of canned delights. No matter what it is, it will be published, and it will be read, and it will be listened to. I think that's enough reason in itself to persuade me that I ought to keep writing and ought to write something. But there's more. The burden in this debate is to tell us why we should never write again. Not a note to a friend, not a letter to a pen pal, if those exist anymore, because this is the 60s. Not a book, not a poem, nothing. All I know right now is that I want to write. Not only that, but I want to be listened to. I want my voice to echo from the mountaintops when I die. Not to be consigned to the dustbin of history, the one copy of my book rotting in some corner of an annex of the British Library somewhere. This is a unique opportunity to transcend this pointless, carbon-based, decomposing mortal shell of a body that I have, and to have my words, my ideas, my name transmitted across the ages. Closing government tell us that we rob ourselves of the only source of joy that we have when we continue to write, and that people will believe us no matter what. No, you do that. You rob us of the only source of joy we have, the only meaning we know we have, when you tell us we can never ever write again. We might feel somewhat hollow knowing that people will believe us no matter what, but it's better than nothing, because the alternative is robbing myself of the only thing I know gives me meaning. You consign me to be a prisoner of my own mind, knowing that the things that I want to tell people will never be told. The things that I want to say can never be said, because they will only be in here. They can never be published, they never can be given to anyone, they can only be imparted by oral tradition, and God knows that's gone down the shitter. So ultimately, this is something that means that I can still be listened to if I publish again. I might be scared. I might worry that I'll be wrong, in which case I could correct myself later on when I publish the sequel. I might only write a book at the very end of my life and have it released posthumously, but I won't retire. And the reason for this is ultimately that I know that what I want to write is something that I want the world to hear. I am likely to exercise a good degree of epistemic modesty in this. I'm likely to only publish things of which I am absolutely certain the truths that I hold, as it were, to be self-evident, the sorts of things that I think that people ought to hear and definitely need to know, regardless of whether, regardless of who they are and where they come from. And so I think that it's likely that I'm quite careful in what I write, but I should write. Before I go on, I'm happy to take, give opening on the chance.
By the rules of British Parliament, opening opposition defines what the counter-op is. But even if you want to pull a knife out of their back, we were the first team to tell you that hedgehog ears or your manifesto about your own heartbreak might be misinterpreted against your own personal incentives.
Right, yeah, I get it. Okay. One, not a knife. They gave you a very specific conception of what one might write. We said that no matter who you are, you want to write something, and therefore you are an author. Also, I don't think that OO gets the fiat on exactly which author and where we are. I think that's a really odd quirk. I'm not sure I particularly want to go into the meta debate of how BP works right now. I think you guys might be quite bored. But also in terms of the stuff on hedgehogs' ears. No. So that was because you might be misinterpreted. Yeah. Okay. Here's the thing. You've made your speeches as though humans are algorithmic, as though we are decision trees who read something, go if this then that, if this then the other. I recognise that people can believe something to be the gospel truth, and yet they can also make that cohere with their other beliefs. It is entirely possible that they could read my book, and they could, and whilst they might misinterpret it in some way, that doesn't necessarily mean they act upon it every single moment of every single day. It is entirely possible for them to read it and use it at some point, but not at others. I don't understand why you think that people become slaves to the book that I have written, rather than just believing it. Okay, finally. Et tells us, in response to the POI, that now that you have the knowledge, that you have this power, you are likely to write in a way that exercises yourself malignantly, if you're self-interest. But ultimately, I ask you, why would I check myself before I wreck myself? The reason that I am writing something, the reason I'm publishing something, is because I agree with myself. I think I'm right. Authors are fundamentally arrogant and narcissistic, because I don't care if anyone else necessarily disagrees with me. The fact that I'm publishing it, the fact that I'm putting it out into the world, means I think it matters, I think it deserves to be heard. I don't think I should silence myself. I oppose.
Clear at the end of that speech, Tim writes a blog. Pack it in. 2 points of clash in this debate. 1, big moral stuff about the world. 2, your life as an individual and how you destroy it. Firstly, let's mop up the bloodbath that is the opposition. Opening opposition stands up and says, we're just going to write one sentence that says, love thy neighbor. As is rightly pointed out, people can misinterpret that. So the second speaker for opposition stands up and writes, nope, stands up and says, wait a minute, we'll write an extra bit that informs everyone of it specifically what we mean about how they love each and every one of those neighbors. Might I suggest that given the sort of panic that you guys had when it was pointed out that not all books and not all interpretations of gospel are real, means that you have to write more, that you as an author are probably trapped in an endless cycle of revising the work that you created, noticing every tiny mistake that you've made, and then hoping that you can mop it up again and again. I'd probably suggest that this is going to make you fucking miserable at the point at which you start seeing some things beginning to go wrong and you feel personally responsible for cleaning those things up. So then, closing opposition stand up, we're like, no, what we're going to do is write some beautiful poetry. Might I suggest that poetry, like 2 things to this. 1, if all of the meaning in your life comes from producing good pieces of artwork that everyone loves, and you suddenly discover that that only happens because you have a magical power, you probably start to grow pretty damn insecure about yourself and whether or not your life has any meaning, or whether or not the work you produce actually gives you the kind of truth that Tim says about how people view you and how you relate to them. I think it is probably more plausible that once you realize you have this power and people only love your life's work because of the magical power you've been given, that you are likely to grow insecure. Insecure people tend to lash out and do increasingly bad things, as was the material of X's extension. So we think even if you start out with the best intentions of the world and you are a romantic nature poet and all you care about are leaves, you you are probably in the end going to end up writing increasingly desperate stuff as you realize your life is meaningless, your loved ones are leaving you. That's probably where you end up. But finally, a lot of people who are artists draw like things from their own life. As Ev points out in a note that she's passed me, what if your ex was a dick and you write poetry about heartbreak and it makes you very sad? Everyone in the world now perceives that individual as a bad person who has read your completely impact, even if you are purely based and interested in art, probably extremely negative to other individuals, and that's something you should focus on. If you are an artist who is convinced that you need to convey your own truth, like, there's just a boatload of problems about that, not least of which, because you can read the Romantics works, which are supposed to be like nature and leaves, and you've got people out there trying to draw political meaning from them. So even if you want to think that all works of art are apolitical and you can just write beautiful stuff, like, you're just wrong. Like, there's a reason why people study literature as a degree, and it's because you can pull lots of different meanings out of things. So either you're writing something super, super clear, which is what opening opera talk about, or you're writing something messy. So let's go into that now. 1, big moral stuff about the world that's all very wonderful and tiny. Here's the thing. Opening government, stand up and tell you, like, there are a couple of problems, right? Like, 1, you probably don't know what the good is, and 2, like, the bad people are coming in as the X-Men. Here's the thing. Even if you write this piece of work that says everyone is good and everyone deserves respect, it's not really good enough. I don't think that the people who vote against a national health service actually believe that poor people aren't real. What they are interested in is other people, like the people closer to them. What they are interested in is their ability to purchase things, with their ability to spend that money. I don't think if you write the very basic stuff that opening officers want to talk about human dignity, you're going to see the kind of changes you want. I think what happens then is you start having to write more and more specific manifestos, right? Like, that's what we tell you, is that people make decisions based off of very basic premises that they probably think don't make them a bad person, right? The vast majority of people who are sexist don't think that they are basically terrible people or who don't respect women. What they think is they respect women in very specific roles. So if you write something super basic, like treat everyone with some kind of dignity, that is not likely to have the positive outcome that they want to talk about. That means you have to start writing more, and that means the more work you create, the more open that is to multiple different interpretations. Like, there was a guy called Jesus who said lots of stuff that he thought was pretty good about how you should love thy neighbor and how you should treat other people with respect. Look how that fucking turned out, right? Like, at the end of the day, it is just not the case that you can say, do this good thing, like respect everyone or treat them with human dignity, that people are then going to respect everyone or treat them with human dignity. Moreover, if you write, like, respect everyone of insert list of races or insert list of genders or insert list of sexualities, and you miss one out and another one comes along, chances are someone is going to say you missed them out on purpose, not just because you made a mistake. And then if you add an addendum, that creates like a new school of people who believe you, and it turns into a bloodbath. All of that, your fault. You grow increasingly psychotic, right? But secondly, no thank you, we think the greater vagueness you have, which is when they pin their hat on, like, the more likely it is that people misread things, the messier it is. So your life is utterly destroyed. But secondly, on the stuff of your life as an individual. But firstly, I will let, okay, crap.
To be clear, your harms are so bad to outweigh our benefits. Why can't I, if the author, just write another book and recount everything I said?
Because the issue is that, like, it's that it destroys the world, and, like, as in, to the point, like, you realize you've made a mistake. First of all, it's probably too late, because if it's a mistake so bad that you need to be like, oh crap, I've effed up and I need to start writing this book again, you probably have already gone too far. But more than that, as a person, there's so much responsibility and so much attention you need to pay to how people deal with your work that you just have to keep doing this, and therefore you could, like, it's not worth the buy-in in the first place. What's much better is if you just retire as a whole. Like, if you guys want to say you write one good thing and retire, but then you come back if you messed up, like, by that point, it's too late, but also people taking the original thing you wrote as truth and then you write another thing probably means that you have different schools of people believing one thing's more true than the other, because that's how interpreting the gospel works. So I just don't think it's as clean cut as you can undo what you did before. Alright, so secondly, stuff about your life, right? Because Tim wants to stand up and say, like, if you're an author, what you want is for people to, like, love you, and you don't want to be consigned as a prisoner of your own mind, right? A couple of things. One, like, it is probably true that you do want people to love you for your work. Ed says that in her extension. What she also says, though, is where if you are writing for that reason, and you begin to write and know that people love you because of the superpower you have, and not because they actually value the work that you produce for the world, then you grow increasingly insecure about yourself and the artistic value of what it is that you have produced. This means the temptation to reaffirm those insecurities by making more people love you, or by writing more truths that make people buy into your image as a person, grows increasingly. So even if you have the most benign intents in the world and the least political ones, I think the personal insecurity that starts to overcome you when you don't know if your loved ones love you because apparently you write, like, beautiful poetry that they just cannot resist, or if you have these kind of magical abilities, you think
that undermines you as a person. Insecure people are the kind of people who are more likely to lash out and grab onto those around them. Like, the thing about that is that its insecurity makes you more likely to do bad things, but it also means that you're more likely to just write more and more as an author. And the more you do that, the more you get to construct a world that narrowly warps itself around you entirely as an individual. Not only do you rob your life of meaning, but you also rob the lives of those around you of the meaning that they have any chance of receiving. The only responsible thing you can do at this point is to put your pen down forever. Very proud to propose.
Do you want a license?
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Nick, you asked like to do this.
Sign of things to come. Just a second. There's a lot. Hang on, just wait. I'll like direct you. Hang on. Oh yeah, totally.
SSEC, SSEC,
Oh, at this point you want the debate to get a grip, do you?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that.
It's fine. You see things and ask why. I dream things and ask why not. I think those words by George Bernard Shaw encapsulate the mindset and motivation of those who commit their imagination and observation to paper. In the real world, I think every author seeks in their own little way to create something that matters. In Ops world, I am become God, the ultimate creator, destroyer of ignorance. My word forever matters. And in a debate where we know nothing about the specific interest or morality of the actor, except that they have chosen in life to dedicate themselves to that authorship, that is the only thing that can matter. I'm going to do three things in this debate. Firstly, I'm going to answer the question whether there are things that are correct, and the answer that, spoiler alert, is that it's irrelevant. Secondly, I'm going to answer the more important question, which is should you sacrifice your own desires, beliefs, and interests for the chance that those might go wrong, and whether you should take into account broader morality in doing that. And thirdly, I'm going to talk about what you necessarily want as an author, which is to write. Before that, I have individual rebuttal, and I'm just going to kind of go through this chronologically. So I think opening government, this is TechRay, I think opening government seems overly concerned with what is morally correct, as though this debate was this House believes that the person should retire. But basically their case can be summed up in that first Prime Minister's speech as follows. You might get it wrong, or you might get it right, but you'll probably get it wrong. And even if you get it right, there's a personal risk to you because you might be captured and blackmailed by people. As mentioned earlier, it's unclear to me why you should be so specifically concerned with getting it wrong rather than pursuing what you yourself believe. In particular, I think it is reasonable to claim that if you know that you have this power, you will make every effort possible to make sure it does not contradict your own interests. I think you'd be more careful with your words than anyone has ever been before. I think you would make sure that you were never committing something to paper unless you were absolutely certain. And if you were absolutely certain, I think it doesn't matter if you got it wrong, because you know that you are correct, it's in line with your own personal beliefs. So you will always be doing what is in your own moral interest or your own moral mindset. So that then brings us to the personal risk, where you might be captured and blackmailed by people. As opening opposition point out, why can't you just publish this anonymously? I think opening opposition responded to this perfectly well, and the response we then get from OG was, but you might still get forced in retirement. OG's response to this, the best kind of version of OG is basically that they should just never reveal that they have this power to anybody. We say that worst comes to worst, we are happy to take our time to write the best book ever and then to publish it on our deathbed when we know that we can't be held to any risk. Like, we think it is perfectly possible to get around those personal risks, which ultimately are trivial. I will write on the front page of this book if necessary. You will defend me with your life against those who might want to misuse my power if necessary. Ultimately, the word that you are trying to get across and the perception that you're trying to get across is one that you ought to value. Then Sophie says, but the problem with this is that it's hugely illiberal to control people. And I ask the question, but why is this person a liberal? You are an author. You are deliberately trying to change people's minds. That's why you write. You're constantly trying to make them read something and believe something new about the world. And that might be agreeing with your political philosophy, or it might be having some new perspective on some situation that they might encounter. But either way, the very purpose of your existence and your career is to change people's minds. It might be illiberal. I don't think if you're an author you particularly care, because in some way you are trying to motivate those individuals. And ultimately, all we were left with an OG was the response that basically, like, this could go wrong, no, and because of that risk, you should not do it. By that logic, I don't think you should do any action, because it's possible that it might not play out in a way that you intended. They had to do more work to explain why you should sacrifice this personal desire. We think you can hedge against that. As I mentioned, you've become so careful about what you're going to do that you would not try to minimize the risk that occurs. Like, if OG want to bind yourself to that retirement by making yourself read a book, we're also having to bind ourselves to say, we will put so much thought into everything that we write that we will never feel morally culpable, even if it does go wrong, because we made every effort that was in our power to try and prevent that. No. We are accused of moral arrogance by opening government. You are an author. You are arrogant. Don't tell Sally. You are arrogant. Genuinely, we are happy on our side of the house. Even if you wanted to use this power to become a dictator god and enslave the earth, we don't think you are bound by anyone else's morality except your own interest. If your arrogance and your ego is so large that that is what you desire, we think you have an interest in pursuing that. Then from Etsuko we get all truths are quite controversial, even respect all people, and many people disagree. Again, unclear why we care, because obviously the one person you do agree with is yourself. So you don't care whether other people might disagree with your view, because you yourself are correct. Next we hear, Gospels are still open to interpretation, see the Bible. I'm going to posit the claim that anybody who doesn't take the Bible as the literal truth and is a creationist and believes that exactly the words that are written are correct isn't treating the Bible as gospel. They might be calling it gospel, but that's not what the word means. Gospel is the word of God, the immutable truth that can never be changed, and you must interpret it as such. I don't think that they can just say this is going to be as open to interpretation as they think, which also, by the way, is a direct contradiction of opening government, who claim that people are going to be enslaved by this writing. No. Next. I'm sorry, you are not writing a constitution, right? It's super unclear to me why you're suddenly writing on every single moral question on society. And even if you did, you would agree with yourself, so why would you care? I think it is likely that people would only write about things which they're certain and which they might care about particularly. No. I want to note that from the perspective of the author, and this is going to be a nice reference to the chair in our round one, that whether you are Maya Angelou writing Why the Caged Bird Sings, or whether you are Adolf Hitler writing Mein Kampf, those beliefs that are always going to be within your own personal interests. I know it's not a nice argument, but I do think from the perspective of an author, if you have a viewpoint that you believe in strongly enough to get it across, that is one that you ought to pursue. No. Finally, I want to say, I think Kate was a little glib about Tim's case, which recognized that humor was an element of persuasive speech, but it was actually about triviality, it was about individuality, and recognizing that that might exist. Then we get that this is going to impact your relationship, that people will only love you because you're magic. I'll take you in a second, Etsuko. Like, you've identified a bad superhero plot arc, I guess, but it is likely that this is a note Tim gave me, and it just says, you're likely to have an existential crisis, but it doesn't. But my point is that, like, it is unclear that this would significantly affect your relationships. I think you would manage that as much as you could. But yes, closing.
So, assuming you just write about heartbreak and hedgehog years, as you tell us, a huge reason why you write as an author is to convey your message. But if you have to take care to write the most carefully drafted book on earth ever, a huge amount of joy and pleasure that comes about from writing is lost.
I don't think that's true. People take lots of time to write the best book they can in the status quo. Why would they change that significantly, knowing that this book is going to be taken up by people and change everybody's minds? I think ultimately what ends up happening here is they are asking authors who have often had to fight against a publishing process in which the brevity of their genius is never correctly recognized by the tide of history, in which people are constantly telling them that their ideas are not good enough, in which they may be able to affect, in the best case scenario, some small modicum of change, the opportunity to have the greatest amount of change, to forever become an author that is immortalized in human history as the one who made the most difference, and the most difference according to who they as an individual believe themselves to be and what they believe society ought to be. It isn't about trivial issues like poetry or hedgehog art. It's that some people really care about hedgehogs. Some people might really care about solving racism, or they might care about development economics, or whatever. But the point is, whatever your passion is, it finally gets recognized and realized to its fullest extent. That's something you can never have in opening government, and you don't need to be told by them to vote for us.